Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Today we're going to be repairing this PlayStation 5 controller. It has some sticky buttons that aren't working correctly, and the controller itself is quite dirty. So we're going to start by removing the black plastic shroud that's covering the two screws that hold the shell of the controller together. We'll use a plastic pry tool to pry up on the bottom of the edges of the shroud. Then we'll work our thumb around the shroud to remove it. Next, we have to remove the R1 and L1 buttons, as the remaining two screws are hidden behind it. If you hold your index finger over them as you're prying, they won't fly across the room. Now that they're removed, we can go ahead and remove the two screws that are hidden behind those buttons. Next, we'll remove the two screws at the bottom of the controller. Okay, great. Now we're going to start working our way around the controller with a plastic pry tool to pry apart the controller shell. It'll take a little bit of time, but with perseverance, you'll get there. There's two plastic clips underneath the analog sticks. We'll just pry these up, which will release the shell. Okay, great. Now we can go ahead and remove the battery from the controller. Now we'll remove the single screw holding in the battery tray and the small ribbon cable that's attached to it. Then we'll pull the battery tray out. Next, we'll remove the two screws just above the rumble motors. Now we'll remove the touchpad's ribbon cable from the main board. It can be a little bit tricky. Just take your time to ensure that the cable doesn't get torn. Next, we have to remove the two ribbon cables on each side of the main board. Now we can remove the main board. Push up from the opposite side on the joysticks and the main board should pop out. Now we'll remove the two screws that hold this white panel into place. Now we can remove the inner pieces away from the front shell. If the speaker pops out like it has in this case, we'll just place it back into its slot. Next, we'll remove the rubber pad and the 4 buttons to begin the cleaning process. To clean, I'm using a Q-tip with isopropyl alcohol. I just want to remove all of the dirt and debris that's on the plastic, which is causing the buttons to be a little bit sticky and not move freely. Now that we've cleaned around where the buttons are, we'll go ahead and start cleaning around the analog stick area. It's always surprising to see how much gamer gunk builds up over time. Now we'll repeat the same process and clean the D-pad. Remove the rubber pad, remove the button set, and start cleaning. This little grenade blower is really handy to blow out any dust that's left over. I want to make sure that there's no gamer gunk on any of the buttons, so I'm going to go ahead and clean each one. I'm going to do the same to the D-pad, making sure that all that gamer gunk is removed. Now I want to make sure that the rubber pads are functioning correctly. You can press in the little pads to make sure that there's nothing caught underneath the rubber. The rubber pads make contact with the circuit board underneath to register when the button presses. Now that everything's clean, we can go ahead and start putting all the buttons back into the shell. Then pop the little rubber pad back on. You'll see some alignment pins where the rubber pad sits. Now we can do the same for the D-pad side. Then we'll put the start and select buttons back in. And then we'll put the inner piece back into the shell. Next, we'll put the 2 screws into that white piece. We'll fold the main board back over, ensuring that the ribbon cable comes through and isn't being crushed. Next, we'll reinsert all 3 ribbon cables into the main board. It does require a little bit of pressure to make sure that the ribbon cables are seated correctly. We'll go ahead and put that little ribbon cable back in the bottom. Now we'll put the battery tray back in. There's 1 screw and its ribbon cable. We'll put the 2 screws that sit just above the rumble motors back in. From here, we can test all of the buttons to make sure that they're working correctly. Now we can go ahead and put the battery back in. And now I want to clean the front of the shell, as there's a lot of gamer gunk build up. You can use a little bit of paper towel and some isopropyl alcohol to speed up the cleaning process. A lot of the buildup seems to happen in the joints where the front and the back of the shell meet. Now we can go ahead and put the 2 pieces back together. We'll start by putting the L2 and R2 buttons in on an angle, and then push down on the shell to seat it correctly. Now we can go ahead and put the shell screws back in. So there's 2 on the bottom, and then the 2 underneath the R1 and L1 buttons. We can go ahead and insert the R1 and L1 buttons. They just click into place, and then we'll give them a little test to make sure they're working. Now the last step is to put the little black plastic piece back in. We'll start with the analog stick side, putting it in on an angle. And then on the bottom side, there's a little clip, and we just make sure that that goes into place on each side. To complete the clean, I'm just going to give the analog sticks a little wipe over. And then wipe over the rest of the controller. Turn it on. Test all the buttons out. And that's it. If you found the video helpful, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. See you next time.